Welcome to today's explainer. We're going to completely flip the script on how you think about success, wealth, and, well, survival. Look, so many of us are just exhausted, right? Exhausted by the constant pressure to hustle or chase that overnight wealth. But what if the secret to lifelong freedom isn't actually about winning big? What if it's about mathematically ensuring you never, ever completely lose? Today, we are unpacking a really fascinating framework called the Kang-Yan Systems Model, or CYSM for short. It's essentially a blueprint for designing a truly collapse-proof life. Here is our architectural blueprint for today. We'll be walking through 5 key phases: the blueprint, the foundation, the shock absorbers, the perimeter defense, and finally, the universality of this system. Let's get right into it. All right, part 1, the blueprint, myth versus reality. So, to build a system that lasts for decades without collapsing, we kind of need to clear the site and totally redefine our core goals. You know the typical modern dream, right? Get rich quick, make your first million by 30, catch the next massive crypto wave, all that noise. Well, CYSM operates on a totally different logic. The goal here is to recognize long-term signals instead of constantly chasing short-term noise. It fully embraces this idea that slow is actually fast. Think about it. By focusing on preventing the accumulation of failures, rather than just blindly chasing maximum returns, you're actually creating the fastest, most absolutely certain path to freedom. Moving right along to section 2, the foundation, thinking like an engineer. Now, when I say we need to engineer a resilient life, don't panic. You don't need a technical degree for this, I promise. You just need an engineering mindset. And honestly, that requires a pretty massive philosophical shift. See, modern education usually asks, what should I do today to earn more? But systems thinking asks, how should my system operate? Making that single mental shift, it practically melts daily anxiety away. It replaces all that stress with systematic discipline. Discipline that's driven by regular contributions and strictly limited choices to keep you safe from those risky, speculative temptations. In action, this model relies on a cyclical flow. You've got your regular contributions feeding in, you've got long-term holding creating compound growth, and then, this is absolutely crucial, a cash buffer sitting right at the bottom for crisis protection. But the real magic, the absolute game changer here is in the center, the auto-rebalancing engine. This isn't one of those portfolios you have to constantly manage, tweaking it every day and stressing over it. No, it's self-correcting. It literally forces stability, minimizing the accumulation of failure and amplifying your certainty over time. Okay, part 3, the shock absorbers, surviving financial black swans. We absolutely have to stress test this beautifully designed foundation against real-world disasters because let's face it, unexpected financial black swans, they are going to happen. It's inevitable. But the system handles them by being entirely self-driving. When the market unexpectedly drops out from under you, you don't panic. You don't try to frantically predict the absolute bottom of the market. Instead, an auto-rebalance protocol triggers. Your system automatically expands its cash buffer, giving you literal survival ammunition. You just use this deployed cash to sustain your life while you wait for the recovery. You're letting time be your ally, not your enemy. To put that into perspective, let's look at the concrete math of a 2008 financial crisis simulation. Imagine you have a $750,000 portfolio, and it suddenly drops 33%, down to $500,000. Most people would panic sell at a massive loss just to survive, right? But in the CYSM framework, a $100,000 cash buffer automatically activates. The result is that your life is perfectly sustained without you ever being forced to sell off assets at historically low prices. And while you calmly live off that buffer from 2009 to 2012, your dividends just keep rolling in, eventually recovering and actually exceeding your original portfolio level. The magic number that makes that entire survival sequence possible is this: 15%. This is the exact, non-negotiable cash buffer metric that is baked right into the CYSM framework. It is the absolute critical shock absorber you need to prevent a complete systemic collapse during periods of crazy extreme volatility. Section 4, the perimeter defense, rethinking life insurance. This fourth structural component requires a really radical shift in how we view risk. It completely changes the conversation around things like life insurance. Traditional insurance operates on the idea that, hey, because you can't prevent a loss, you have to transfer the risk somewhere else by buying compensation mechanisms. But CYSM argues we should be investing in internal structural defense instead. Think of it like a giant planet. The Earth doesn't go out and purchase insurance against solar radiation, right? No, it relies on layered internal buffers, like its geomagnetic field and atmosphere, to prevent external shocks from causing a systemic collapse. For us as human beings, these internal buffers operate in 4 distinct layers that all work in harmony. First, you have a 5.61% income engine that provides a continuous, self-sustaining energy supply. Second, you have that 15% cash buffer we talked about to absorb market volatility. Third, you have a low-energy engine to drastically minimize your baseline survival costs. And finally, psychological and health management to prevent a total, software collapse, if you will. Together, these form your true personal insurance. External policies, they become a supplementary safety net, definitely not the crutch your entire survival relies on. Let's zoom in on a highly specific number from the author's framework for a second. 667 Singapore dollars per month. This is the low-energy engine I just mentioned. It's a meticulously calculated, incredibly minimal survival cost baseline. I mean, that is literally less than what some people spend on takeout coffee and random streaming subscriptions every month. By drastically lowering the minimum threshold of resources you need to simply not fail, you instantly build an ironclad perimeter defense. The less energy you require to survive, the harder your system is to break. It's that simple. And finally, Section 5, the universality, building your life system. Having looked at all this architecture, you might be sitting there wondering, okay, does this highly specific model actually apply to me? And the incredible answer is yes. It really boils down to a simple mathematical reality. Earning a conservative 5.61% return, compounded safely over 40 years without a collapse, equals stable, guaranteed financial freedom. On the flip side, aggressively chasing a 10% or higher return while risking just one total failure, that puts you all the way back to square one, back to zero. Consistency and failure prevention will absolutely always beat high-risk speculation. It's fascinating because the author actually brilliantly mapped the complex fault tolerance logic of industrial engineering directly onto everyday personal life asset allocation. Industrial fault diagnosis and preventative maintenance, they translate perfectly into personal expense control, risk redundancy, and health protocols. It's basically a universal language of stability applied directly to human life. And to be clear, this wasn't just theorized overnight on a whiteboard somewhere. The author started simply logging experiences on a blogger site way back in 2010. Over decades, through continuous reflection and even dialogue with AI, the language of the system really took shape, fully emerging as CYSM in 2026. This framework was quite literally forged through 60 years of the author's life, driven by continuous real-world feedback and constant calibration. Because at the end of the day, true stability isn't copied from a textbook, and it rarely comes from an inherited fortune. It surfaces organically. Decades of real constraints, income constraints, health constraints, time constraints, they force constant, small, absolutely necessary adjustments. Every single adjustment gets tested against reality. What works is kept, what fails is discarded. Which brings us to the most important takeaway of all. I want you to look at your own financial and personal foundation right now and genuinely ask yourself, is your life system stable enough that external insurance is truly your last line of defense and not your first? Are you constantly chasing the next big win, or are you engineering a life that simply cannot collapse? Start building your buffers today, focus on those long-term signals, and always remember, preventing failure is the ultimate path to freedom. Thanks for learning with us on today's Explainer.